Yeah, like I said, I'm Dylan. Here are some memes that you can look at. I guess the main thing, rebuilding API workshop. So first things first, like what we've already established, what Juan was talking about, and what you can see in your server folder in Catbook is we have a server.js file. Currently, we use Express, and we'll continue using that for the rest of this class. But if you notice, we call it app as the server name. So this represents your overall web application. For this specific workshop and APIs in general, we're going to use router, and that'll be stored in api.js. And the difference between those two is that we want to separate the API into like an isolated group of API endpoints, and so it's modular, and we can like move it around, and so it doesn't depend so much on the changes in server. And then some more definitions here. You'll hear me use like API endpoint, API route. Those just mean like just a specific API function. Or like in the case of like route, it's like the name that you use. So you use it as like a argument into your API routes, and I'll use them interchangeably. And like for our purposes, they're basically equivalent. There's some minor differences, but it doesn't really matter at all for us. So now, okay, that should be next slide. All right, so and now like you may have noticed that like in our server.js right now, we have a single accessible API endpoint, which is API/test. We're going to be expanding this, moving into API.js in this, and teaching you along the way how to link it to like, I guess, our hard-coded data, and then also make new API endpoints. So I'll give you some time to do this. This is just checking out the new workshop. It'll be ready for it. So I'll give you a minute. Sorry, I will. Yeah, I don't know why it's not getting rid of my. Okay, I guess quick show of hands. Has everyone done that? Okay, I'll move on now. It's generally just check out the W5 starter, same thing as we've done before. So first thing we're going to do is open api.js from the /server directory. We'll be doing some live coding. There will be also screenshots in the slides. So we can go through it. So this is what our api.js looks like. Very basic. We have a import express, see our utilities, or not utilities, sorry, it should be server. A bunch of stuff here. So now that we have that open, we can move on to creating the router. So this is this is just establishing the router, like I was saying. This is the variable name. So, sorry, we'll do that now. So this is a method call of Express. It's integrated into it. I believe use relatively the same commands. Actually, no, you don't. But it's a way to determine between different endpoints. We'll use it here for the API. And then this is just expanding on that. What this line does is it exports the router so that other files can know about it and import it. So I'll do that really quick. Okay, so now we're set up to import the router into our server so that the server can direct requests to the API. And so you're going into that. So this will be in server.js. We're going to import the router from our API file. and that'll just be another require like other imports. Make sure you put the .js at the end as well. Okay. Now moving on. This is also in server. So now that we have it imported, we're going to tell our app to use it for all endpoints that start with /API. And so what this conveniently does also is that in our actual API file, we don't need to prefix all of our API routes with /API. So we'll add that now. Okay, so that's all the work that we need to do on the server. Just these 2 lines, it's just telling the server, okay, this API exists, and now we're going to use it for all routes and endpoints that start with /API. Okay. So hopefully this helps for people who can see. Okay. Moving on. So now this is, sorry for the squish screenshot on the left, but what we're going to do is we're going to move our example API test route from server.js to api.js. The only things that you need to replace are this app.get. It'll be app goes to router, and then this /API/test, like I mentioned, everything's prefixed in api.js with /API. So we get rid of that and just put /test instead. So I'll just copy or cut and paste this out. Save. Place with router. Get rid of this. Okay. Everyone's good with that. We will test it out. So we're going to open up a terminal and then go to npm start and then just test our previous behavior. Believe that should be localhost 3000, not 5050. That's my bad. So start this front end or this back end. And then go to API/test. And so it has the same behavior as before. I'm just moving it to a different file. Okay. Is everyone caught up, or am I going too fast, or any questions? Okay, we'll go back. Okay, everyone good? So if you got lost or something, that's completely fine. Just do the same thing. We're at step 1 now. So just get reset that shard if you need to, get fetch, get checkout W5, that's step 1. And also feel free to raise your hand, or if you have any questions, like join the help queue. Okay. So now we're going to look into adding more routes to Catbook. We're going to add 2 in this workshop, which will be the post and the comments, and we'll make get and post requests for each one. But we're going to start with the get request first. But first we need data for that. Previously, we've been calling an external API from that the staff built. But for now, we're going to add our own data. So this is just like you don't have to do exactly this, but you will need like my name, a data object similar to this. So I'm going to do that so that we can use this to display on our page without having to call that API. So I'll go back and forth because I don't have this exactly memorized either. But start here. So I'm just gonna start with my name. I'll just do anonymous for now. You can name it whatever you want. It says in the actual like workshop to change it. So and here data will be an object and so what we'll have stories as one of them, as one of the entries here, and that will be a list. Then comments will be another list of that, so that we can access everything using data.stories or data.comments. And as for the stories and comments themselves, so it'll be a list of story objects. And if you're more familiar with Python, I'm throwing around the word objects a lot. It's a dictionary with a key value pair. So here I'll just copy this, like underscore ID 0. We do this so that we can tell apart entries that may have the same author or other things, or like and like contents as well. We have a creator name. We'll do Nick. And then we also have what he said, some content. Let's say he loves dancing. Now that we have our story, we'll move on to the comments. I'll leave this slide up for a bit because I've been switching a lot between. Okay. So comment will be the same, basically the same thing as before. We'll have ID 0, creator name. We'll do Felina. And then the content. Let's say she likes dancing too. So I prettier like made it change, which will be introduced later, but this is what we have for our data. The reason, like, well, in next week and tomorrow, databases will be introduced so that we won't hard code this. So like you won't hopefully ever be like hard coding your data in your actual project or website. But this is how we're going to do it for now. And then I guess I'll wait another like 30 seconds and then we can get a show of hands and then we can give more time if needed. Okay, is anyone, I guess, not done with? Okay. So now let's make our stories get endpoint. So you may notice that in these like router.get, app.get, there's like this rec and res thing that hasn't, I mean, it's been explained by Kwong, like you have the request and then the result, but like using these actual code is scary. And it's like, what is this? How do I use it? So we have these are objects. And so we have rec is the incoming request from the client. And then by the client, I just mean whoever's trying to get information from our API. So it may be your front end and your website. Like we did an API call in Catbook in the front end earlier in the workshop and in the workshops. And then, or it may be just like a random dude on the internet, like Kwong, getting like stuff from OpenAI. So there are two things, like two main things that you have, like a rec.query is usually used for GET requests, and rec.body is usually used for post requests. And when you're specifying like what fields are in these query and body, you specify them when you make the request. And you'll see an example of that. And then res is your service response. You can send data back. In this case, we are, and then you can also send a status code back, a bunch of other things for both of these. These are just the two main ones that we'll use. So let's consider like these are the type of questions that you want to ask for every endpoint that you're making. What does this route need to do? In this case, we need to send back all of the stories to the front end. Maybe in the future, we'll make like, you might need like an API/story for a specific ID, but for now, we're going to send back all of them. And then from the API's perspective, how can we access all of this? It's with data.stories. So we can start implementing this now. This is pretty, I guess not, I wouldn't say like simple, but it's just a one-liner, like the /test. This is misspelled. I don't know. I like did stores in the actual like screenshot, so I put it here. Actually, it would just be, I recommend just like copying and pasting this. Your /test route. And then the thing that you're changing is the /stories. And then you're just sending back, getting rid of this method. So right now, we don't actually have anything based on the request. We'll do that later. But usually APIs do something based on the request and don't just send back blindly all of the data. Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, everyone good? All right. So now we'll move on to comments. So if you remember when we were actually calling Git and making a request to this API, this common API before in our front end, we include this ID prop, right? As the parent, I guess, yeah, the parent of the comment. So what comment what story the comment goes under. So we'll use this in our actual Git method, our API endpoint, to decide which comment to return. So what does this route need to do? Figure out what story we need to get. So we already have that from rec.query, like I was saying. Then filter out only the comments that are the children in that story, and then send back those comments to the front end. And so you'll actually be implementing this. So we need to add this API or endpoint. Like I said, there's a 3 tasks. Here are 2 hints that might help. You should have all the tools to do this, but it isn't like super intuitive when you're first doing it. Okay, can I get like a show of hands? How many people are done? It's completely fine if you're not. Okay, we'll wait a few more minutes. We'll do like a couple more minutes and then let's give the solution. Oh, okay. Like 30 more seconds. Okay. So for people that got it, congratulations. I don't think I got it when I was taking web.lab last year. Thanks in the time. So this is the answers to the questions I was talking about. So figure out what story we need to get the comments from. Number one, we already have that ID, and that's contained within red query. We sent it in the GET request from the front end. And then to filter out that comments, we'll use the filter, I guess, method, like function in our that comments, and that'll we can use that to filter out all of the comments except for the one that whose parent matches the one that we sent from the front end. And then we can use res.send to send those back. So for the filter part, this is the most, I guess, like new if you're learning JavaScript or programming in general. And so you can see here, we're using the comment.parent, and this is going through the entire list of the comments that we have. And then we're just going to check if it's equal to what was said in the request as the parent. And so this will hopefully result in just like our list of comments, in our case, just one. And then we can see this is like the expanded solution. I had a lot of comments to explain like what each line is doing, and also separated out the rec.query.parent instead of the parent as in the filter. So if you could just go line by line, you can extract the parent story ID from the request with the parent, and then check each comment to see if it's the parent, and if it matches, then we'll add it to the eventual response that we're going to send back, which in this case is filtered comments, and then we can just res.send filtered comments. I also, as like Kwong mentioned, status codes with requests and responses. This would be a 200 if we did it successfully. You can also send that status. Yeah. Any questions or anything on that? Yeah, so the question was like, where are we getting the back and the parent? So going back to rec query, we originally like this rec is just like when we call this when we call this get method from the front end, it's sending basically just a package of data to this specific endpoint. So, and when we're specifying this parent as the props ID, so everything in these curly brackets or curly braces here, that will be included as part of the query. And so we can access this information from the query. So in this case, this means we specify a parent. So then this will be included as part of as a field in the query object. And so like I was saying before, rec has a lot of things that you can access. And so because it's a GET request, the way that our built-in function GET request that we built for you, it adds it to the query. So we can access it using that. There's a lot, if you're interested in more, there's a lot more low-level stuff with like network packages and sending information across it. But the gist of it is that when you're trying to do a request to an API, you specify the information that's going to be sent in these curly braces here in the form of an object, and then you can access it from the API. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? I guess repeat the first part of your question. Yeah, so we can't really do this, and we'll test that, and we'll post 50/50 to like for this specific workshop, and that'll be like in a second to test if it's right, like with this slide actually. But when you're actually like if you're trying to test your API with Postman or anything like that, it'll actually be something similar to this. So if you ever notice these question marks in your URL, that's actually specifying query parameters. So like let's say like we have like comment equals 4. If we built like this would be sent like as a GET request usually, and then it would be specifying that the comment field is equal to 4. And so like if you look at when you're like going on YouTube, for example, generally the URL is like youtube.com/watch like /video or something, and then it has like a question mark or like an ID, and that's specifying like which ID to query. So that's the general syntax if you want to like look at websites as you're browsing across, and that'll be what usually happens in your like actual server. But for now, like because we're hard coding the data, we need to test it from the front end and do that. So we can do that now. So do your one terminal do npm start, another terminal do npm run hot loader, and then we can look at catbook from there, and then hopefully see our comments. All right, so sorry, I'll leave this up for a second. And if anyone else has any other questions on anything else, feel free to raise your hand too, or join the help queue.
Yeah, what is the data like the front of the like data dot like red RAS
Oh, do you mean like, okay, so do you mean like just res.send, like the
like yeah, but then the next part like data
oh yeah, so oh yeah, so the context is, or I mean the question was like when you're back in the, you're talking about the original stories endpoint, right? So in the original stories endpoint, like what does like data dot like stories actually doing? So I'll go back. Sorry if anyone's entering these commands. So back when we're like, so these things are called objects in JavaScript. So the way to access, like you can see like we have stories, comments, whatever. There's not like in normal arrays, if you have any experience with coding or like lists, like you can put like these like square brackets and like do the index. But to access things in objects, we do the name of the object. So in this case, data, and then we do a dot, and then we can access, and then the name of the specific thing that we want to access. So in this case, we want to get all the stories. So when we're doing res.send data.stories, then it's sending back all of the stories and that list. And so that's how I like, and you can also access methods this way. A method just being like if you have a class, like router, for example, then you can call a function. That's a part of that. And so that's why like rec.query is this way as well. So it's just accessing a specific field in an object. Yeah. Okay. Has everyone started their start and hot loader? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone say no, so let's test it. Okay. So we can see here that I forgot to implement the comments. So let me just pull the branch. Okay, so now I have magically implemented it. So we can see that Nick loves dancing and Felina loves dancing too. Hopefully everyone sees that on theirs. If not, then oh, sorry, you can go to step 2, but we're going to do a quick demonstration of some flaws in our current implementation. So let's say I want to comment. I have my name, I have everything there, but the problem is I don't love dancing. And I'm sad about it. So I want to flame people. I'm anonymous. I'm ready to go. I want to post this comment. First, let's open the browser console to see what happens. Oh, I'm on mobile. So when we press submit, we should see it, right? Apparently not. So you can see here, if we just look at this error, there's a weird like post thing, 404 not found. You know, we've gone over that. API request failed. So let's explain why. Let's just going through it. So currently, our API does not have anywhere for a post request that's also a comment. So in your endpoints, there's two types of requests, as Kwon was saying. So there's get and post, right? So when we already coded this before, but when you press submit, you're doing a post request to comments API, but we don't have that in our current API. So it doesn't know what to do. Where's the comment? It just crashes. So let's implement that. Like I was saying, we can go back on step 2 to get to where we are now. Okay. So the first thing that we want to add here is a catch-all endpoint that Kwon was talking about. I'll also remind all of you to put this route below all other like API routes if you're going to add that like within a file, or else this will eat their requests and you won't get the expected behavior that you want. So we're going to do this right above the module.exports equals router. You don't have to have like all these like this, like you could have this like this, you couldn't have this like console.log. I guess this isn't technically like the status 404 isn't technically necessary either, but this is like generally in your backend when you have an error or even just in general, you want a console.log so that you can help debug. Because a lot of the time, like you may have an error like happening in the front end, weird bug, and then you don't know where it's coming from, and just console and the logging, it helps a lot. For like I said, it wasn't technically necessary, but you always want to send like a status to your front end, because like let's say like if someone was developing like just the front end part of an application, and they had no access to the back end, they would not know what's going on if they went to a random part of the website and there's a bug happening or something like that, and an error happened in the back end, but they didn't send like a 404 or 500 or any other status request. The front end person would have no idea what's going on. So it's just generally good practice. You can also send this message with it. And yeah, and you can see here that this like syntax is you can do res.status and then .send. I don't think you can do .send and .status, but maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So if everyone, this is like, yeah, also I guess add it to your code. So I'll do this really quick. So we should already have an endpoint here. I'll just copy paste it from your server.js. Once again, this time we're only replacing app with router instead of this. Let's log our things. So this, by the way, this like I guess like string, weird string stuff with like the $sign and like the curly braces and like this. It's just a way to put in like variable names into your strings so that they'll display. So like what this would say is like API route not found. And it would say, if we were doing like the post example with the comments, it would say post and then the URL that we did. So it'd be API/comment. And this isn't the only way to do this in any language. There's a pretty wide variety of ways to do like string formatting. Okay. Any questions, everyone? Okay. Moving on. So now we're gonna look at post requests. So if you remember from new post input, we have this content value that like when we type into the text box that we update. And so you can see here actually, whenever we like, I think you can see it with also this. So like there's this pretty cool tab in the like when you do inspect on Chrome. Pretty sure it's also in Firefox if you're using a different browser. But once you start going on it, you can actually like see all of the requests that your website makes, or any website for that matter. And so like when we're like, typing in a new post, you can see, or a new story, you can see a bunch of information, see like the status code, whatever. What we're interested in is the like payload. For just no other reason, the demonstration, you can see that even though it did not update, and this is giving an error that we don't have it post API story, we can see that the content went through because we sent it from the front end. It's just that the API didn't know what to do with it. So let's let it know what to do with it. Right. So like I was saying before, for the post request, you're going to want to use rec.body. And generally the convention, like you still have content. So it doesn't really change anything, but like I guess you can probably technically use rec.query if you're building your own thing, but I'd say rec.body for post. And so now let's add the stories endpoint. Going back again to every like user question that you should ask. So for post endpoints, like you need to figure out what data needs to be saved. Generally, the difference between GET and post requests are GET requests are retrieving information from the server. You might send it, or from the backend, I guess, but you're giving it maybe a little piece of information, and then you're expecting most of the time more. But it's usually not modifying anything in the actual server data itself. Now for post requests, you're usually sending the server like, oh, user did this. I want you to modify the database. That's not always the case for either one of those, but usually that's how it goes. And if you're deciding between like, oh, this should be a GET and post, that's usually what needs to be done. That's who usually decides it. So you figure out what data needs to be saved. You need to put it in a unified structure. In this case, we already kind of have that in the content. And we also have like, we have our input with the content, and then we also have our output in the data object. And also says add to our data object. In this case, usually it'll be a database, which will be explored tomorrow. So here is our, this will be an endpoint, but this is just what our new story object looks like. You can see it's in the same format as what we have in data, or in our data in API.js. You can see it has an ID, a creator name, and a content. This ID is not unique. As you can see, it's just the length of the actual content, which I do not recommend, but usually you don't actually need to make the ID because your database will do it for you. So this is what we have right now. And then moving on to the general method or API endpoint. So you'll notice the main syntax difference is in router.post instead of GET, representing post request. We're going to create a new story object, add it to our backend data, which is just adding it to the array of stories now. And then we're gonna send it back to the front end, just so it knows that everything was added and done correctly. Usually you don't need to send the whole object back to the front end. Most of the time you just don't. So like you can just send like a 200 back or something like that. But in this case, we'll just send it back. It's like, okay. But you do want to send some acknowledgement or of some error happening so that the front end knows that everything went well. Okay, so now just look at this. Make sure to put it above this. I'll actually group it with this story. So first, like I was saying before, I'm going to make a new story object. Its ID is going to be that's that story set length. Oh, and I guess this would technically be unique because we can't delete stories now, but either way. So this creator name is going to be my name. And then the content will be ref.body.content. Okay, so that's our new story object. We're going to append it or push it to the stories data object, and then we're going to send it back to the front end. Okay, so hint that we're gonna be doing the same thing that we did with Git, but with post. So does anyone have any questions before you have to add your first post endpoint? Okay. I'll leave this up for a bit more. Okay. So now we're moving on to comments. Now you have to do it yourself. So it's very similar to API/story for the post request, but we're gonna do it for comments this time. And so ask yourself like the same 3 questions, like where are we getting data from? Like how are we putting it together? Then where are we adding it to? And then we also need to send it back is the general outline. And if you get stuck, please use the help queue or the questions doc or raise your hand or anything like that. Okay, show of hands of people who are done. Okay, we'll do a couple more minutes. We'll do like 30 more seconds. Okay. So let's look at I guess the solution, but so as you can see, it's very similar to the stories post method. So we're creating a new comment object and then we're adding it to data.comments instead of data.stories. And then we're gonna send it back to the front end so that it knows it's okay. So just like putting this here, put it below the slash comment. Just do comment. So it's already changing comment for story. And then let's test this out to see if our actual post requests or post endpoints actually work. So you could have kept your start and hot loader running from before, but you can run those again if you close them. Give you a few seconds to do that. So, okay, now let's see if this actually works. We'll keep the console open just to see any errors. Okay, so let's see if we can actually claim people. Can we? No. Okay, so we actually didn't add that comment, and that's because I forgot to change this. So beware for that. I think this should work now. Okay, so we can add these, add new comments. Let's see if we can add stories. I don't like dancing. I don't like dancing. And I can even comment on my own. I agree with myself. That's great. So let's kind of wrap this up and discuss some of the drawbacks by this implementation too. So I'm just doing this. What's next? So we can change something in server.js and API.js, you know, we have our npm run start, node even will automatically reload. That's great for debugging, but in our specific circumstance, it's pretty bad because data gets reinitialized. And so it'll reset to the to what we default put it in. So let's say want to add a comment. Like this is a endpoint for post requests to This is a pretty bad comment, but we'll hit start. Is it? Oops. It reset. And so all of our hard work and all the users' posts and all their data just got lost. And we lost a ton of money. Everyone's going to quit our service and our website. No one's going to use Capbook ever again. And so the way that we avoid this is by using, like Colin was mentioning it, we've been mentioning it, database, right? But it's just a persistent storage that we can access from the back end or wherever at any time. And we can just, instead of having data in our server that will make crash, might run out of power, we'll just have it like a hard drive somewhere in a server room or on the internet or cloud or whatever.